So I'm Arif Virani. I'm the Member of Parliament from Parkdale High Park. This evening was very significant. One, because we were holding a public consultation, a town hall on defence policy. And secondly, because we were doing it as a joint effort with three different members of Parliament. Myself, Borys Wrzesnewskyj, and James Maloney. So three different ridings, three different parliamentarians, but all committed to hearing from their constituents about the exact same issue, which is what Canadians want to see from their government in terms of defence policy, defence spending, defence priorities. It's also important because in my riding there are a large number of Polish Canadians and a large number of Ukrainian Canadians who are very concerned about aggression in Eastern Europe, destabilization being caused primarily by aggression by Russia and Vladimir Putin. And what we wanted to do is hear from constituents like that about what they feel should be done here in Canada by the Canadian government to counter that kind of aggression, to show solidarity with our NATO allies, with our European allies in the face of that kind of aggression. It's critically important for me, it's critically important for my constituents, and it's critically important for this government to stand shoulder to shoulder with our allies when they're facing those kinds of threats to their territorial integrity and their sovereignty. I'm Arif Virani. J'aimerais juste ajouter quelques mots en français parce que j'ai parlé en français avec un homme juste en arrière, donc je suis très heureux d'être parmi vous. And just to try and impress you with my linguistic skills, I will also say laskawo prosimy I duże dziękuję, and witamy I dziękuję bardzo. So, okay, enough pathetic showing off, so I apologize about that, but I'm here, and Borys and James and I all wanted to host this and drag John all the way over from Scarborough, because defense policy is one of those things that everyone understands is obviously a federal jurisdiction, but perhaps doesn't get enough attention and perhaps not enough robust discussion. As James had mentioned, this is the first time in over 2 decades where we're having a policy review. I will confess in my riding of Parkdale High Park, there are a large number of Polish speakers, there are a large number of Ukrainian speakers, but as evidenced by this room, this is not just an East European issue, this is a national and very much an international issue. And John will demonstrate that because he's got a fancy map that I can't wait for him to unfurl. But I think it also goes without saying that we are aware of some of the more obvious concerns and threats that face us, and about some of the less obvious ones. So on the top of the obvious list would be obviously the threat of terrorism, and also the threat by certain international instability, such as posed by Vladimir Putin. But some of the less obvious ones that, as I was thinking about this today, are things such as cyber attacks, health attacks, things that can sort of affect you by stealth, or even threats to your security that are a bit less obvious. So in my immigration context, we talk about a compassionate refugee response as a way of countering radicalization and keeping Canadians safe here on the ground. And that's something that hopefully we get a chance to discuss in a more comprehensive nature. But I do think it's important to underscore to this audience and to those of you gathered here tonight how seriously the Canadian government takes the issue of defence and defence policy, how seriously we take issues such as the threats of terrorism and the threat specifically posed by Mr. Putin. You saw a very successful trip, and I don't mean to steal any of Borys's thunder, but he will be speaking a bit about the trip recently by the Prime Minister into Poland and into Ukraine, where there was a commitment to Operation Reassurance, which dealt with sort of consolidating support in the Baltic states and also in Poland with Canadian forces, and Canada taking a leadership role. And as well, you've seen a doubling down on our efforts in response to Ukraine and the requests that are being made from us by our Ukrainian allies here, but also by the Ukrainian government in the region in terms of training, in terms of assistance. And I think what it shows is that we are trying to engage in a responsible way, we're trying to engage in a meaningful way, but we're also asking Canadians to enter into that process. I will also raise, and again, I hope this comes up during the course of the conversation, that there are other traditional roles that Canada has always been in the forefront of, one of which we created by Mike Pearson's creation, which was peacekeeping. And as we look to re-engage with the UN, peacekeeping, I think, is something that should be discussed and will be discussed going forward, and whether there's a role to play here, and we're interested in hearing your views about that going forward. So enough from me. I'll turn it over to Borys, who will then turn it over to John, and then we'll hear from all of you guys. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.